Well, good afternoon. It's nice to be off of the Hill for a minute and to be with so many powerful women. And let me just thank the panelists, all of you. I tell you, our time is now. Your time is now. And I want to just say to my mayor, Mayor Cutter, congratulations, first of all, and thank you for the invitation to be here. And I really want to applaud your leadership and all of the great work that you're doing in one of the cities in my district, the city of San Leandro, which under my mayor's leadership, it has been consistently one of the top digital cities in the country. And so I'm so proud of you and my city. And to all of our mayors on the panel and to all of you, again, thank you for your service to our communities and to our nation. Now is the time for women and the voices of women to rise up and to lead. You really are a powerful group of women whose voice and whose work and whose intellect are badly needed for such a time as this. Now, this was a very lively discussion. I heard some of it, and thank you so much for giving me a chance just to be with you because I have to get back to the Hill. But this discussion and what you're talking about today, it comes on toward the end of Dr. Martin Luther King's 90th birthday celebration. Of course, our JUM major for peace and justice. Now, one of my favorite quotes was delivered, though, by Coretta Scott King, just 3 weeks after Dr. King's assassination. And I want to read you this quote because I'm reminded of this quote today as I was coming over to visit with you. She said, "The woman power of this nation can be the power which makes us whole and heals," and she said, "the rotten community, now so shattered by war, poverty, and racism." And Coretta went on to say, she said, I have great faith in the power of women who will dedicate themselves wholeheartedly to the task of remaking our society. Remaking our society. This is never truer than today, and that's what you all are doing. Now, on the Hill in Congress, we just welcomed the most diverse Congress in history. The most ever in history. Record number of women. For the first time, we have 113 women as members of Congress. 113 women. So we are seeing in action the woman power of this nation that makes us whole. Now, let me say to you that I was elected, and I'm sharing this story to see how far we've come, but how far we need to go. I was elected in 1998, and I was then, in 98, the 20th, only the 20th African-American woman elected to Congress. Now, that's since 1789. 1789, okay? And so it's really time. Also, there has never been an African-American woman in the leadership of the House since 1789. And so now, as co-chair of the Steering and Policy Committee, it's really time for women and women of color to rise to that challenge. And I think about this every day of really helping to remake our society. Because I know personally, many of you know that all too often we're left out of the leadership table. It's also sadly well established that women of color are less likely than their white male counterparts to get funding for new businesses. So I'm thrilled to be here today to tell you a few things about myself and how I think we can empower women, specifically women of color in our communities. Now, first of all, as a young single mother in my 20s, I fell on very hard times while raising my two boys after a divorce. But I was determined to go to school and get my degree. But I was on food stamps and public assistance, which really was that bridge over troubled water for me. Because I never would have made it had it not been for my government, the people of this country, understanding that young women like myself needed that help. Now, I came to Washington, D.C. as an intern for the great late Congressman Ron Dellums, who recently passed, who I worked for 11 years. I started as an intern in his office, but I became his chief of staff. And during that time, and this is dating me, but during that time, there were only 2 women on Capitol Hill who were African American. That was myself and Shirley Chisholm's chief of staff, Carolyn Smith, 2. We're still fighting for diversity and inclusion on the Hill, but we've come a long way. Now, I did get my master's degree, my master's in social work, again, worked for Ron, but I went back to California, continued to work for Ron, and then I started my own business. I became a federal contractor, an 8A contractor in the Small Business Administration. Now, because of the 8A program, and it was really hard for me as an African American woman to navigate all this, I opened this business and I employed between 400 and 500 people for 11 years. 11 years. This was extremely difficult because, as you know still, many of the barriers, access to capital, identifying contracts, selling your company as a woman, and then as an African American woman, a woman of color, it was extremely difficult. But I had to break that glass ceiling for others, and we did. And then when Ron retired, I ran for his seat, and I've been here in Congress now 21 years in April. And so part of what I have to do, like what you're doing, I know, is to help women set up their own businesses, help them cut through the red tape, help them identify access to capital, help them understand how to write their business plans. And really, there's so many brilliant women out here who can start businesses, run businesses, employ people, and contribute to the economy. The struggles, though, with regard to women in business are reflected. I want to cite this 2017 report by the Center for Global Policy Solutions. It estimated that the systemic discrimination faced by entrepreneurs of color has resulted in 1.1 million fewer businesses in the United States. That's 1.1 million businesses missing from your communities. 1.1 million businesses that could be employing people, if not for the systemic and the structural discrimination that many of us still face. So I'm working like you are to support other women and minority small businesses to ensure that the federal government, their contracting policies are equitable and inclusive. Since 2007, women-owned businesses grew 58%. 58%, now that is phenomenal. But get this, businesses owned by women of color at a rate 3 times that, they grew at a rate 3 times of that. In 2018, businesses owned by women of color accounted for nearly half of all women-owned businesses. Now that's phenomenal, but that took a heck of a lot. And I know that took a lot at the local level as mayors, helping these women of color through local efforts to support them. African American women-owned businesses grew by 164%. So that's progress. So with all the noise about us going backwards, and many of you know things are happening that aren't too moving forward for women, we're still staying the course and we're still fighting. And the progress, of course, is in danger. So many companies now with the shutdown are losing their revenue. People are not being employed. You know, that it's a very difficult time in terms of their credit, access to their lines of credit, and so we've got to end this shutdown and end it now because it's hurting so many contractors and dedicated civil service. So we have to do that. And so finally, let me just say, economic development alone is not enough to empower women. We need to think about all of the barriers that lock women out of entrepreneurship. That includes, and I remember this very well, health care, access to affordable child care, college costs, the skyrocketing housing prices. Mayor Cutter knows in my district, in my area, it's off the scale now. So many people now are homeless, can't afford to live in my congressional district. And outdated infrastructure. Communities of color with high poverty rates also are plagued now again with redlining, workplace discrimination, underfunded schools, and crumbling infrastructure. So implementing inclusive policies to help empower women of color entrepreneurs and women in general is just the beginning. I implore you to think about your own stories and your constituent stories. You know, find the woman power that you have found in yourself in others. We've got to topple these institutional barriers that lock out women. We've got to topple that. So thanks again for inviting me to be with you. This discussion on the woman power of this nation and the work that remains to make this nation whole is extremely, extremely important. Shirley Chisholm, the first African-American woman elected to Congress. Shirley, remember Shirley, she was my mentor. She encouraged me to get involved in politics. And she said, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. Well, you all have brought your chairs and you're here to stay. And so thank you again so much for your leadership, for your voice, and for your woman power. So important. It's good to see everybody.